She pointed straight at me from a red sports car and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "He's a millionaire, you fool!" My driver froze like the truth had just been thrown through our front window. And in that moment, with gravel spitting under her tires and my heart trying to climb out of my throat, I had to ask myself the ugliest question I've ever asked. Had the kindest man in my life been lying to my face the whole time? My name is Sarah, and this is the part of my story I never planned to tell on the internet. It starts in the most ordinary way. Bills stacking up like plates after a bad dinner party. A job I loved that was running me ragged, a computer that belonged in a museum, and a father who tried very hard to sound okay when he wasn't. I was tired in that soul-deep way that makes your bones hum. I was late more often than I like to admit, and I was one small crisis away from crying in the canned goods aisle. You know what I mean? The day Alex walked up my path in that neat blue uniform, it didn't feel like a meet-cute. It felt like someone finally put a steady hand on the wheel. Shoes clean, but worn hair, trimmed tight eyes that didn't jump around the room. He said, "Good morning, ma'am," without trying to impress me, and for the first time all week my shoulders dropped from around my ears. I'm not proud of this, but I hired him halfway through the interview, the second he offered me a solution I didn't even know I needed. My old gate guard had quit by text with 2 words, "I resign." No notice, no plan, just a hole in the middle of my day. Alex listened, nodded, and said, "I can drive and cover the gate until you find someone." Calm, like he was asking if I wanted sugar in my coffee. That's how it started. Traffic that morning looked like a museum installation about frustration. 2 lanes closed, a delivery truck parked like it had given up on life horns, screaming for the sake of hearing themselves. I was already late, my boss already over it, my future already looking like one long apology. Alex checked the rear view, checked me and said, quiet, like a secret, "I know a short way." He slid us through side streets I didn't know existed. A bakery steaming up its windows, a hand-painted mural that said, "Love shows up," a tiny church with a crooked sign. And somehow we pulled up to my building 10 minutes early. 10 minutes early felt like a luxury vacation. "How did you do that?" I asked, like a kid asking a magician to show the trick. He gave me a small smile and said I drove a lot for my old boss. No bragging, just the facts. Next day, 7 a.m. I'm on the porch in a clean blouse I ironed with a hair straightener, trying to pretend the quick panic in my chest is just coffee when Alex rings. He's early, he looks exactly like yesterday. Precise, gentle alert. Then my phone pings with that 2-word message from the gate guard. I resign. And I laugh this helpless, high-pitched laugh I hate. Alex says I can move into the small gate room tonight if you want. I'll cover both until you find someone. He says it like the simplest math. I tell him he doesn't have to. He says I don't mind. He carries a duffel bag in that evening, places a paperback on the little nightstand like a flag, and that square of light by the gate starts to feel like a lighthouse. Safety looks small from the street, but up close it changes how you breathe. Then the computer died. I can still hear the soft pop like a bulb giving up, and then the screen went black. And then the job I love began to slide through my fingers. I pressed the power, pressed it again, checked the cord, swapped outlets, whispered please like it might listen. I work in numbers and timelines and deliverables, and that day the only thing I could deliver was tears. Not loud, not performative, just that slow, humiliating leak that means your body is done pretending this is fine. Alex knocked on the doorframe the way good people do, like your space is yours, and asked if he could take a look. He pressed a button, checked a cable, and then looked at me with the kind of apology you can't fake. "I'm sorry," he said, "it won't turn on." I said it was okay, even though it wasn't. Here comes the first miracle. A white delivery van rolled up at 7 a.m. The next morning, the driver holding a box like it was important in a way his job didn't often feel. My name was printed clean across the label. Inside the newest laptop, the kind I only touch at the store with 2 fingers, because the price tag makes my palms sweat. A small white card at the bottom read, "From a secret admirer." I laughed out loud, a startled, hopeful sound. And then I cried again, because kindness is disorienting when you're used to just scraping by. That machine saved my job, no exaggeration. It didn't freeze when I needed it. It didn't gasp when I fed it. 3 spreadsheets at once, it just worked, which felt like love in a world where so many things don't. 2 days later, the city made other plans for me. Alex and I were headed to a meeting across town, the kind of meeting that could tilt the month, and halfway across the bridge, the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. We coasted to the shoulder with trucks roaring past like dragons. I rolled the window down an inch to call a cab, and a motorcycle slid up. Glove flashed, my phone vanished. Just gone. You ever have one of those days where the universe seems to be playing a prank that stopped being funny 2 steps ago? Yeah, that happened. Do you think that's fair when the hits line up like that? Here's what Alex did. He locked the doors, turned to me like there was no one else on that bridge, and said, "You're safe, I'm here." His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't heroic, it was steady. He pulled out his own gray flip phone, the kind we make fun of until we need it, and tried to call, but we had no signal. He said he'd walk to the corner for a better connection. I said, "Don't leave me." I meant it. He stayed. And then a black sedan eased in behind us like it had been waiting for its cue. A man in a suit stepped out with the energy of a helpful neighbor and introduced himself as Ben. He offered us a ride and somehow got us to the meeting on time. Inside, the client shook my hand and said, "Your friend called, told us to expect you late, told us it wasn't your fault." I wanted to ask which friend, but the only thing that mattered was that we didn't lose the account. Sometimes mercy arrives in a nicer car than you expect. That evening, the front door opened, and my father walked in with a suitcase and a face set to grumpy concern. He's one of those men who loves you like a blunt instrument. Too honest sometimes, too loud, always trying. He looked at Alex's uniform, the way fathers of daughters look at men in uniforms, and said, "Driver, help with the bags." I winced, Alex said. Of course, and we all started that careful dance families do when a new person is inside the walls. Dad watched Alex weed the flower bed and muttered, "Missed a spot." He sat in the back seat to the grocery store and offered commentary like a talk radio host. Too fast, too close, too jumpy, and then whispered to me in a tone meant to be overheard, "Don't get friendly with the help." I felt the heat climb up my neck, and I told him to stop. Alex kept driving, face calm, hands steady, and I learned something about him I couldn't have learned any other way. His patience wasn't performance, it was bone deep. Then came the letter. My father opened it at the kitchen table with his reading glasses low on his nose, and I watched the color drain out of his face in stages. "They're stopping the checks," he said, voice brittle. "Overpaid. A year. 40 years of work, and one mailer can make you feel disposable." He's not a crier, my dad, but his eyes turned glassy, and I saw the man who taught me to ride a bike take a hit I couldn't absorb for him. I did what grown kids do when the world turns mean. I said the useless, hopeful things. "We'll figure it out. I'll take a second job. We'll sell the car." Inside, I was doing math you can't do out loud without sounding desperate. Alex stood in the doorway and didn't try to fix it with empty words, he just stayed. And the next morning, two things happened before the kettle boiled. First, my bank account showed a deposit that didn't make sense. More money than I had ever woken up to, enough to solve 3 problems at once. Second, the National Pension Office called my father and apologized for a processing error, promised back pay with interest, said the person responsible had been dismissed. My father sat down hard and exhaled like he'd been underwater for a week. I stared at the screen, at the numbers at the ceiling, at the little white card that said, "From a secret admirer," and felt the puzzle pieces click into their outlines. I looked out the window at Alex brushing leaves off the walk and thought, could it be him? I took his envelope of payout to the gatehouse that night, because the one thing I could control was paying a man on time for honest work. I said I was late, I said I was sorry, I said I appreciated him, and I pressed the money into his hands. He closed my fingers around it and shook his head. "You should keep it this month," he said, and there was no pity in it, just partnership. Money does a lot of things, but sometimes it's just dignity that changes the air in the room. A man who doesn't have much turning down money because he sees your need, that's rare. From there, look, I was 90% sure. A driver doesn't make calls to pension directors. A driver doesn't drop a laptop at dawn. A driver doesn't have a friend who appears on a bridge at the exact right minute. But a rich man doesn't hand back a paycheck and say, "Pay me next month," without flinching either. So which truth mattered more, the secret or the heart? If it were you, what would you have done? Right here is the twist that split my story in two. Saturday afternoon sun glazing the porch rails, Mia humming some 90s song while she chopped onions, the kind of domestic quiet that makes you believe life might stop being sharp for a minute. The engine noise hit us first, a sleek purr, then a hungry roar. Red sports car, polished like a lacquered tongue, slid to a stop at the gate. A woman stepped out. Sunglasses, lipstick diamonds like glass stars. She looked at Alex in his blue uniform and said with the ease of someone who'd been born to get her way, "You're done playing dress-up, get in the car." Then she turned to me, took me in like an item on a menu that disappointed her, and smiled a smile with no heat. "He's mine," she said, "and he's rich." I heard my voice ask Alex like it belonged to someone else. He looked at me, and then he did the one thing I couldn't digest, not then. He lied. "She's my ex," he said. "She's lying." The woman, later I learned her name is Chloe, laughed like a champagne bottle popping, slid back into that red shark of a car, and tore away, leaving a stripe of contempt in the air. I stood there holding a dish towel that smelled like onions and tried to understand the ground under my feet. Pattern interrupt. Think about that moment. The kindness you trusted the man who has been steady in your doorway, and the stranger who drops a grenade and walks away. How do you move? I didn't sleep that night. Streetlight cut the room into gold and gray, and I lay on my side replaying everything like bad security footage. A driver can't. A millionaire might. A good man could. And then there was that church sign down the block. "Love shows up," hanging in my head like a dare. He had shown up. During the dead computer. During the bridge mess. During my dad's letter. He had shown up before the suit, before the rooftop, before any glamour or cameras or whatever else I imagined from a word like millionaire. But he had also lied, and lies rot the floorboards under your feet, even when the house looks solid. Morning brought a box with my name in gold script and a dress inside that felt like it had been made for the idea of me, not just my measurements. The card said, "Please wear this tonight. A car will pick you up at 7. Your secret admirer." My dad clapped, Mia squealed, and my stomach tried to crawl up into my throat. I didn't say a word to Alex all day because I was afraid the wrong word would shatter something I couldn't glue back. At 6:59 p.m., because apparently we were living in a movie, a limousine whispered up to the curb. Alex opened the gate in the blue uniform I suddenly didn't know how to look at, and then he opened the car door without meeting my eyes. "Have a good time," he said, and it sounded like chewing glass. The building the limo slid beneath might as well have been a hotel for the moon. Elevator without numbers, that subtle hum that says money was spent to quiet something, and then a rooftop with one table in a pool of candlelight. A man stood with his back to me, black suit, that fit like a second decision shoulders, I knew somehow. He turned. Alex. Not the driver. Not the gate guard. Not the man pretending. Just Alex. He smiled, nervous and sincere, and the world steadied even as it spun. "I'm sorry," he said before hello, and if you know anything about apologies, you know how rare that is. We barely touched the plates. We talked. He told me about Chloe, how he'd loved what she represented more than who she was, how the house felt too big with the wrong person and too small with the wrong truth. He told me about the night he sat in his empty kitchen and realized he didn't know which parts of his life belonged to him and which parts were for show. He told me about seeing my job posting, "Driver must be kind," and how it lodged in his chest like a song he needed to learn. He told me he had friends with planes and watches and hearts like polished stones, and he didn't want that anymore. He wanted a life where kindness wasn't a stunt. Was the plan flawed? Sure. Was it manipulative, maybe? Was it the only idea he had that felt honest in a crooked way? Yes. He said all that without flinching. I told him about the kind of tired that makes you mean in whispers, the math of groceries, the ugliness of having to choose which bill to pay and which to make excuses for. I told him what it meant to have a man stand in my doorway and say you're safe like a fact. I told him about the envelope of pay and the quiet way he pushed it back toward me. I told him that lies are acid, slow but certain, and I needed to understand whether this one was poison or medicine. He listened. He didn't defend. He didn't spin. He didn't use the word but. Here's the mid-video promise I made at the top. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. I didn't say yes to him that night. I didn't say no. I said two things that are harder than both. I said, I'm angry and I'm relieved, and I said, if we do this, we do it without costumes. He nodded, eyes, wet hands open on the table like a surrender. We danced on the roof without music, city glittering around us like it was rooting for us, and when he kissed me, it didn't feel like a prize, it felt like a promise we were both responsible for keeping. The next morning, we walked into my living room holding hands, and my dad nearly spit coffee across the classifieds. What is he doing in that suit, he asked, like crime had been committed. I said, Dad, this is Alex, and he said, I know it's Alex, why does he look expensive? Alex told him everything. The job, the gate room, the laptop, the bridge, the money, the call, the dress, the rooftop. He didn't sugarcoat the lie, he didn't hide behind intention. He just put the whole messy truth on the coffee table between us and stepped back. My dad stared at him for a long count of 10. Then he slapped his knee and said, Ha. I knew no regular driver had those eyes. He hugged Alex like a son and muttered something about testing his spine. Yeah, that happened. Twist on top of twist. My father had been testing Alex while Alex was testing me, which is peak family if you ask me. Mia came in from the kitchen, took one look at the suit, then at our hands, put the back of her hand to her forehead, and said dramatically, my heart, and collapsed onto the couch like a soap opera star. She peeked through her fingers and grinned so wide I thought her face would split. That's the thing about houses where people love each other. They absorb the shock better. Real life after that wasn't an Instagram slideshow. It was practical and awkward and beautiful in spurts. We found a real gate guard and moved Alex's paperback out of the little room. He kept driving sometimes because he liked it, which made the board very nervous for reasons I still find funny. I sat in the back of his car once while he took a call on speaker and watched the exact same calm he used on that bridge settle over a room full of executives. He speaks to the receptionist and the janitor the same way he speaks to the CFO, which I wish didn't feel as rare as it does. Then came the press. Somebody snapped a photo of us buying fruit at the farmer's market, and a week later a magazine ran an article with a headline, "I won't repeat," because it tried too hard to be clever, and I nearly walked out of the restaurant where we were supposed to celebrate the client we'd just landed. I said, I refuse to be a two-word trope, and he said, "Oh," and we slipped out the back into an alley that smelled like garlic and rain. We sat on a milk crate and split a burger while sirens complained in the distance, and a cat knocked over a bottle somewhere, and in that moment I thought, okay, this is our speed, not the yacht, not the red carpet, just us stubborn and hungry and choosing each other when the story gets loud. If it were you, would you keep trusting after a lie like that, or would you fold your heart and go home? We also went to therapy because I didn't want to be the woman who forgave because the gifts were nice. We sat on a couch that had seen many lost battles and some hard-won ones, and we told the whole story out loud to a stranger who nodded at the parts where we wanted to be congratulated and asked questions when we wanted to be rescued. He said something I wrote down and put on the fridge. Secrets are debts, not gifts. We started paying down what the lie owed. Chloe's orbit crossed ours one more time. She showed up at the gate with a silk scarf and a face that could cut glass and called me names that belonged to a different century. Gold digger, social climber, opportunist. The usual attacks men write for women to throw at each other. I let her talk, not to be polite, but because I wanted to see if any of it could hurt me. It didn't. It bounced off like brittle hail. You can keep the labels, I said, and I meant it with a softness I didn't expect. I'll take the man. She stared like I'd offered her a job she didn't know how to do, then she left fast as if generosity gave her a rash. I don't hate her. I don't forgive her either. I simply refuse to be her story. We got engaged in a car wash. I wish I were joking, but it's the most accurate detail in this entire mess. Suds poured down the windshield. The world turned slow and blue, brushes thumped and hissed like the city had been put on pause, and he pulled a tiny box out of the glove compartment and said, "No costumes, no tests, just us." "Will you?" I said, "Yes," with my whole chest. The ring is simple, which means I love it more. Ben toasted us in my kitchen with cheap beer and an expensive smile. My dad tried to give Alex marital advice like he wasn't divorced. Mia filmed all of it with a shaky hand and no permission. We laughed until the house remembered how to breathe. Now the controversial part, because if you're still with me, you didn't come here for the sugar. Is it okay to pretend to be less than you are, to find out who loves you for you? Is that romance or manipulation? I've lived inside that question for long enough to know there isn't a clean answer you can fit on a mug. If you think it's wrong, I understand. Secrets break trust, and trust is the floor you stand on when the storm comes. If you think it's right, I get that too. Money distorts love until you can't tell if the person in front of you is choosing you or choosing what you provide. For me, the line was this. He didn't test me to watch me fail. He tested himself to see if he could be loved without the safety net of his net worth. He hid his advantages, not my options. He didn't offer me less respect than I deserved. When the truth came due, he paid in full. Do you think that's fair? Would you ever run a test like that, or forgive one if the rest of the person was good? If it were you, what would you have done at the gate when the red car idled and the woman in sunglasses said the line that tried to ruin us? Here's what I know, and then I'll let you talk. Love isn't a resume, it's not a trophy wall, it's not a spreadsheet where kindness cancels out deceit or money cancels out loneliness. Love is small and daily and stubborn. It is coffee on the porch while the neighborhood comes alive. It is a man in a blue uniform saying, "You're safe when your phone is gone and your car is dead." It is telling the truth on a rooftop when lying again would be easier. It is a father who thought he had to protect his daughter, learning he can welcome a man who hurt her and still be proud of her. Love shows up, that sign said, and I believe it more now than I ever did. So I want to open this up to you. Is pretending to be poor to find love a sweet fairy tale that protects a tender heart, or a manipulative trap that takes someone else's choice away? Where's your line between privacy and deceit, between wisdom and fear? When money's in the room, do we all talk different without knowing it? Tell me. Argue with me. Tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right, tell me your version. If you've ever loved someone who had more than you or less than you, if you've ever been tested without knowing it, if you've ever had the courage to say, "No more costumes, just us," and if you felt anything in this, if you're angry on my behalf, if you're hopeful for us, if you're sitting there thinking about the way someone once showed up for you when the engine died and the phone was gone and the letter brought the wrong words, share this with someone who needs a reason to keep their heart soft. Drop your take in the comments, all of it, the hard parts too, because this isn't clean and it shouldn't be. Hit subscribe if you want more stories that don't polish the mess out of the truth. I'm Sarah, this is my life, and I'm still choosing to show up. I hope you do too.